Welcome to the Whiskey Explorer. Thanks so much for tuning in for another episode, guys. If you haven't had a chance to do so already, if you could please do us a quick favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment down below, and turn on bell notifications so you know when we're dropping new content. We've got new reviews and whiskey info coming to you guys every Wednesday, 5 p.m. Pacific time. All right, and thanks so much to all of you viewers and subscribers out there. Really appreciate you having you along for the journey and the conversation. All right, and tonight we have a pretty interesting bottle here tonight for you guys. We have got the Maker's Mark Private Selection. All right, so this particular Maker's Mark Private Selection is a local one from the BC liquor store here in BC, and it is their 100th anniversary selection. So what they've done is they've kind of worked with Maker's Mark to choose the stave profile for this private select. And for this one, we have 1 baked American Pure, 1 seared French Cuvée, 4 Maker's Mark 46 staves, 2 roasted French Mendiant, and 2 toasted French Spice. And this is bottled at 55.55% alcohol by volume. And the date on it here says April 2021. All right, so this will be sort of an interesting one because obviously it's Maker's Mark Private Select, so it depends on kind of the stave selection that you have for your Maker's Mark, so they're all going to be slightly different, but perhaps you have one that's identical to this one. Not too sure. So I'm going to get into this one here. We'll do a quick review, and then what I'm going to do is actually compare it to their base spirit. I've got this cute little Maker's Mark mini right here of the just Maker's Mark, the regular 45% alcohol by volume, so no finishing in French staves. So the reason that I got kind of excited to get this one is there was a lot of sort of positive press and hype about the Maker's Mark FAE01 and FAE02 bottles, and sadly here in Canada we don't get either the FAE01 or FAE02, and so these Maker's Mark Private Selections are basically the closest that we can get. And I actually had to wait for a specific spirit release from the BC liquor store to get my hands on one of those. So it's sort of the closest that I could get to those, so I thought, you know, there's so much positive reaction in the especially in the whiskey tube community and the whiskey sort of enthusiasts in general, really kind of liking that. So I thought, well, we'll give this Maker's Mark a whirl, see how it is. And so yeah, essentially the Maker's Mark is private selections are, I don't believe it's cask strength. So the proof on it is 101.11 or 55.55% alcohol by volume. So that may be watered down just slightly from cask strength. But essentially what it is the regular Maker's Mark at a higher proof finished with a specific stave profile. So what they'll do is they'll actually go in and they'll do, you know, baked American Pure or seared French Cuvée. And that sort of is a different sort of toasting or searing or char of oak staves that are then placed in a finishing barrel to sort of finish the whiskey afterwards, after it's kind of gone through the initial aging. And my guess is on this, it's probably about 5 to 6 year old bourbon. Maker's Mark isn't really super known for, you know, long or well-aged whiskey. So it's probably about 5 or 6 years old, and then it has some finishing time in that barrel with those uniquely toasted or seared staves. All right, so let's have a quick look at the color in the glass here. Just having a look at that, it is a nice kind of medium amber or light copper color in the glass. So there is actually some nice color to that. It may be picking up, you know, significant color from those sort of extra. It says Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, barrel finished with 10 selected oak staves. So those different oak staves that are in there, they're sort of charred to a specification, and then they're kind of dropped in the finishing barrel to give it that added bit of finishing or flavor to the whiskey. So I can already smell this coming out of the glass here, so let's just dive right into the nose on this. Cheers. Okay. And the other thing to note about Maker's Mark is, of course, it is a wheated whiskey. So we're not using rye in the mash bill here. So we've basically replaced the rye in the mash bill with wheat for this. So it would be a mix of corn, wheat, and malted barley in the mash bill. So let's go in for a nose again on this. Cheers. So it's actually a very it's a very prominent nose on this. It's very fruity, so it's like deep, dark, rich fruit. It's not really quite cherry. It's almost like a strawberry or a raspberry, or maybe even towards a blackberry on this. Then there's some nice honey notes in there. A little bit of brown sugar. Maybe the hint of sweet oak. And then there is some nice baking spice in there, so some cinnamon and allspice, kind of some nutmeg in there. So it's actually a really welcoming nose on this. Very fruity, definitely jumps out of the glass. It's definitely quite present of a nose on this. Very fruity, so nice kind of fresh, kind of deep strawberry note there. A little bit of vanilla cream. Butterscotch and caramel. A little bit of sweet oak in the background. Honey, brown sugar, a little bit of baking spice, a little bit of cinnamon in there. Without further ado, my mouth is kind of watering here, so let's go in for a taste. Cheers. Okay, interesting on the palate. The initial note that I got was almost like a cocoa note, so like dark chocolate or even like a milk chocolate in there. Then there was a little bit of a transition to that deep, dark kind of fruit note, but not a cherry. It's not quite a cherry, so it's like strawberry or maybe like a plum, blackberry or raspberry. Then there's some honey sweetness in there. Then there's a bit of a transition to baking spices, so some cinnamon, some allspice, nutmeg, kind of traditional, kind of grandma's baking spices in there. And then there's a little bit of a peppery finish, but there is a drying aspect to the palate here. So it is a little bit mouth coating to start, but then it really kind of dries out the palate to the end. And now on the end of the palate, this is where I'm getting it, where I'm not liking the finish on here. There's like a bitter, tannic kind of oak quality to the finish on this. And this is something, to be honest with you guys, that I have struggled with Maker's Mark from the beginning. I always get this kind of bitter tannic note, especially in the finish. Can't usually get past that. So let's go in for another quick taste, and I'll see if I can pull some other additional flavor sort of tasting notes here for you guys. Cheers. Yeah, wow. Very interesting chocolate note at the very beginning. So it's like overwhelming, almost like milk chocolate. Then there's a transition to kind of like cherry, strawberry, raspberry, kind of a fruity note. And then it quickly transitions into kind of the mid palate to the baking spices. So strong baking spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, allspice. All that's pretty pleasant, and there's like a little bit of strawberries and cream in the background. So kind of liking the front of the palate here. And then right about now is where it dries right out. There's a little bit of a burn going down, and it completely, it's a very drying on the palate. And then there's this, you're left over with this astringent, tannic, kind of woody note. And that's just a note that I just don't find very pleasant, and it's a rough finish on this one. So, little bit disappointed with this one, especially price point on this. I think this bottle was about $90 or so, 85 Canadian, something like that. Kind of had higher hopes for it, especially after all the rave reviews from the FAE 01 and FAE 02. But yeah, I'd have to probably give this one a pass. So anyways, let's give it a quick comparison to the regular Maker's Mark. So I thought I'd open this one here for you guys. It's got a little pull tab here, so gonna open that up. Nice, that worked. And then actually it's a little screw top on here as well, on this little mini bottle that I've got here of the regular Makers. So get a quick pour of this. and we'll see if I can find that same kind of bitter, kind of tannic, astringent note to it. So here's the regular Maker's Mark, 45% alcohol by volume or 90 proof. So quite a difference. This one is jumping up basically by 10% in alcohol by volume. So there's quite a jump to the Maker's Mark private selection here. But let's give this one a nose. Cheers. Oh, I actually kind of like this nose on this one, on the regular Makers. There's that nice kind of strawberry, kind of cherry, raspberry fruity note to the nose. Lots of vanilla cream on the nose of this one. I'm detecting a little bit of the baking spices in there at the back, so like some cinnamon in there, some nutmeg, allspice. And there is a really nice vanilla note to the nose on this. So I'm actually kind of digging the nose of the regular Makers. Just looking at the color in the glass there, it's a little bit lighter than the private selection for sure. More of a kind of a light amber color to that one. Again, this is probably about 5 to 6 year old whiskey in here. Again, wheated mash bill, so no rye in the mash bill, wheat instead. Let's go in for a taste on this one. Cheers. Much, much lighter and softer on the palate here. There's kind of a really kind of pronounced cherry Vicks note to this. Then there's lots of vanilla sweetness, honey, brown sugar. It's really sweet, quite vanilla forward as well, quite vanilla heavy. There it comes again. So there's a little transition there to some baking spices, a little bit of cinnamon, a little bit of white pepper in there. And then again, there's that drying note, tannic, bitter oak. And that's what I've always struggled with Maker's Mark. So to be totally upfront and honest with you guys, I am not a big Maker's Mark fan, but I was really had high hopes for this private selection. I was hoping it would kind of deliver. But again, with the original expression there, at the very end of the finish there is when I'm getting that kind of tannic oak presence that I don't really enjoy. So that'll wrap it up for this review and comparison to the regular Maker's Mark. Thanks so much for joining me for this review, guys. Until next time, may your sails be full and your drowns be fuller. Cheers.